also want to welcome Dr. John Oppenkar, who will be next month's luncheon speaker, something we can look forward to. Next month, Dr. Oppenkar will discuss what he found while researching his book about a topic that impacted all of us, and of course, I'm talking about Hurricane Harvey. Dr. Oppenkar is right there, yes. I saw you earlier, I'm glad you're right there. Great to have you, sir. His book, as you probably saw at the front of the room when you came in, Hurricane Harvey, Houston, and Heroism, celebrating the compassion, caring, and goodness of ethical intelligence in action. We saw so much. I don't even know how to put it into words, but when you look over it, because it's almost, of course, the year anniversary coming up, just the great people in this city who came together and helped all of us, and it's just still so impressive. But back to your book, sir. It'll go on sale soon with all the proceeds from that sale going to Rebuilding Together Houston and Shield Bearer. Those are two organizations focused on helping people who live in Houston to rebuild and restore their lives after Harvey. There's so many people still today that aren't in their homes or living amongst construction, and you think about it and your heart goes out to them, because even though it's been a year, there's still a lot of rebuilding to be done. Dr. Oppenkar is, of course, president and CEO of the Ethical Intelligence Research Center. His work focuses toward making the world a better place through his research, writing, speaking and teaching, and Dr. Oppenkar is a CPA and a John Maxwell team leadership coach. And we hope all of you will join us next month to hear, of course, what he has to say and to get his book. So thank you, Doctor. We want to acknowledge our very good friend, Bill Sherrill. Bill Sherrill is here today. And there we go. And as many of you may remember, Bill is the founder of the Wolf Center of Entrepreneurship program over at U of H, three-time presidential nominee, Purple Heart recipient, first director of the FDIC, and two-term Federal Reserve governor. He's a genuine war hero. Thank you so much for being here today, Bill.
You know, I didn't think about it, but maybe Congress ought to open each session by singing Zippity Doo-Dah. You know, maybe it'd put them in a better mood, you know, get some things moving. Carl, thank you for bringing us together. I've got great friends, dear friends in the audience today, and thanks for letting me give a chance to sort of talk a little about tax reform and about tax reform 2.0. Every economist told us that there's a new normal in America in the economy, that the slow growth of less than 2% of the last decade, we could expect to see that as far as the eye could see. The days where paychecks had been flat for almost 2 decades would continue. Our young people coming out of school would have some opportunities, but not the best. And we could expect every month to go online or open up a paper and see yet another American company moving their headquarters, their manufacturing, their research overseas. And every economic expert said, just get used to that. 2.5 years ago, I set 2 goals for tax reform. I said, we need a tax code built for growth. I mean, literally designed to grow jobs and paychecks in the U.S. economy. That was the first goal. And the second goal was to leapfrog America from nearly dead last among our global competitors in competitiveness through tax code. You know, as Natasha pointed out, the economic growth in America has dramatically changed for the better. 4% growth last quarter. I don't know that we maintain that, but dramatically better than sub 2%. Unemployment is at the lowest rate in 2 decades. Last month it was lower even still. Good news for a lot of Americans. Investment from businesses that had been on the sidelines for the last decade, and some years had been a negative investment here in America, has exploded in the first 2 quarters, averaging 7% or higher, creating massive new jobs, because we now, businesses of every size, can immediately write off from their taxes their new investments in plants, equipment, software, and technology, hugely pro-growth. We now know Main Street businesses, their optimism, our local businesses along Main Street, their optimism as of yesterday is at a 35-year high. Small businesses are hiring more, growing more, paying more than they have for decades. In American manufacturing, who have normally been the most pessimistic about their future, because all they'd seen for years were headquarters and manufacturing and plants and jobs go overseas. Their optimism is at a 2-decade high. And this is sort of amazing. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, American manufacturers, 8 out of 10, are hiring today more, are paying higher paychecks, and expanding. 8 out of 10 American manufacturing companies. That's good for Texas, certainly good for the United States. And the answer is, in the 7 months since we've got a new tax code and a new economy to go with it, the answer is better than in a very long time. And here's what we're looking at. So African Americans, many of whom come from the toughest neighborhoods with, frankly, not the education they deserve and sometimes not the family that can really support them, their unemployment rate is at the best in history. Young people, yeah, really important. Americans without a high school education, those who are always the first to be laid off and always the last to be hired, always, their unemployment is the lowest, is at the best since we've been keeping records. Teenagers, Hispanic Americans, women, the disabled, their unemployment is multi-decade lows, so they're seeing new opportunities. And I think about this last month, in those coming out of prison, Mike, those you minister to so beautifully, now employers are reaching out to them. You know, we're reaching out to them to give them those new opportunities as well. All of that has happened in 7 months. We've gone from a country asking where are the jobs to a country asking where are the workers, because that's what we desperately need all throughout America. So 2.0 is about making sure America never falls behind again, that our tax code is continually improved. And here's the point that I like to make, and I have to the President and the Senate as well. Look at the most successful organizations you know, whether they're in business or elsewhere. Every day they wake up, you wake up, asking yourselves, how do we become more competitive, more innovative, better? Well, I want Congress every year to look at our tax code and ask ourselves the same 3 questions. How do we make America more competitive, encourage more innovation? How do we make it better for families and businesses? It's the continuous improvement every one of you do in your organization. So 2.0 will have 3 different provisions. 1, we're going to make the tax cuts for families and small businesses permanent, to make sure you can count on it for the long term. Not only is that the right thing to do, it's incredibly pro-growth. Just making them permanent creates another 1.5 million new jobs on top of the tax reform. It increases the economy by 2.2% on top of the new tax code, and increases wages another 1% on top of what we're already seeing. So incredibly pro-growth. The second provision deals with savings. Look, we're not a nation of savers. We need to be. Most families will tell you they can't handle a $400 emergency in their home. And while many of us work for businesses that offer retirement plans, it's amazing that 1 out of every 3 workers in a private company don't even have the access to a retirement savings plan. We think we can do better than that. And what perfect timing. Businesses have more money in their pockets. Families have more money in their pockets. And so what a perfect time to make adjustments to help people save more and save earlier throughout their life. Because I don't know about you, I've not yet met that person who came up and said, man, I saved way too much. You know, I just don't know anyone. And maybe we'll find one, but we'll wear out a truck trying to find the second one to say that. And so we think now's the time. And so you're going to see in 2.0 some incentives to encourage businesses, more business to offer plans, incentives to help workers take up those plans, and then some really good changes that will allow families to save more. For example, we're proposing these new USA accounts, universal savings accounts that are available on top of everything else you have today to create more flexibility so families can save and use it for a broader range of things. We're proposing You know the 529 education plans? Have anyone used those to save for school for your kid? Yeah, we did too, for our 2 kids. So this year in tax reform, we expanded it through kindergarten through 12th grade. We expanded them to be able to use for both public and private schools. We expanded it to be able to use for those with disabilities, lifelong learning that they need, all good stuff. We think we can do more, so we're proposing they be allowed to be used for apprenticeship fees. If your child is going into a trade school and wants to go through the apprenticeship process, we're proposing them to be allowed to be used for homeschooling, which is a growing and important part of education in Texas and America. And we're proposing they be allowed to be used for student debt. So that child in your family who's done the right thing and worked hard to get through school maybe has a little less of a burden on debt when they come out of school. Some changes like that. That's the second part of 2.0. And the third part, Mr. Sherrill, is right down your alley. It's innovation. And here's why. This year, America fell out of the top 10 rankings of most innovative nations on the planet for the first time. A lot of it has to do with workforce. We're not generating the workers we need. And I think the new tax code probably pushes us back in that top 10 ranking, but it really raises the question of, are we doing enough to encourage innovation in America? And what we know is that startup businesses used to be a much bigger share of our economy than they are today. Up until the recession, financial recession, for 30 years, we've had a net increase of 120,000 net new businesses every year. In the last decade, that average has been 2,000. 120,000, 2,000. Yet those are the engines of innovation that drive a nation, and we know the country that wins the innovation race wins, period. And so what I want to do is I want Congress every year to be looking at innovation. Bill, we're going to start this year with a modest, but I think smart proposal to encourage entrepreneurship. So we're proposing that startup businesses be able to write off dramatically more of the startup costs in those first couple years, because we know that's a burden for businesses. We're also proposing another change. So, do any of you watch the TV show Shark Tank? Well, we got entrepreneurs here, so do we. So you know that moment when that entrepreneur, that couple, that young person, they've got this great idea, they've worked it through the early stages, and now they've attracted an investor. They're ready to take that business that's worked off their laptop in the kitchen or worked or assembled in their garage, and they're really ready to explode with growth. Well, it turns out the current tax code punishes you at that very moment you're getting ready to grow in a significant way. So we remove a couple of barriers to make sure you can keep those net operating losses going with you, and those tax credits you've assembled go with you to the next stage of growth. It is, I don't want to oversell it, but what I love about this provision is it's smart. It doesn't add a bunch of new tax credits and make the code more complicated, but it really unleashes the innovation here in America, and I'm excited about that. So next year, about 9 out of 10 Americans will be able to file their taxes using a simpler postcard style system. 31 million Americans won't have to itemize to be able to get their full tax cut. Almost 5 million American families, those in families making less than $1 million, no longer have to fool with the AMT, which is, you know, the alternative minimum tax. If the IRS doesn't catch you on the first pass, they catch you on the second. So that's gone for almost 5 million families. And then for our small businesses, you know, they don't have to fool with those complicated depreciation schedules. You know, the good news here, and again, you don't see this reported, but last week we saw our new revenues coming in and how we're doing at this late point in the year. Even with the tax cuts, corporate rates down, individual rates down, small business rates down, all of them in effect, we're generating more revenue for the federal government than this year than last. $30 billion higher than they projected. And Yeah, and you don't hear that one. So I think higher growth, while it won't pay for all of the tax cuts, will pay for a good portion of it. And we have a much different economy, more hopeful than we have today. Permanency will add a little more to that as well, but that also creates significant growth in the long term as well. So I always describe it like this. Washington has been on a spending spree, and the prior administration had 1 year even where they added $2 trillion to the national debt in a single year. $2 trillion. That was with Washington spending your money. We made a really modest investment of $1.5 trillion over a decade, where you're spending that money, where local businesses are investing those dollars, where we have a different economy because of it. I think it's a modest and a fair and a smart investment in a new tax code. Over time, I think it's going to pay off in a significant way, not just in revenues, but in just a different optimism for us. So I'm always really careful about the deficit. It's this, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And in case any of you think you're not paying enough in taxes, I always like to remind people that up until this year, per person, Americans are paying the highest federal taxes per person since we began measuring it. You're doing your fair share. You know, we need to do ours by really getting smarter about spending and the abuse and the waste and just the programs that frankly don't justify your tax dollars. We want to improve every day. That means being open to new ideas and looking at things that frankly we ought to improve. So we're going to take that culture of input, let's fix it, let's make it better. So we'd love to have your help doing it. We want more charitable giving, not less. And what we know is we look back 50 years of charitable giving in America. We're an incredibly generous country, just unbelievably generous. And here's what we know. In the years the economy is strong and people have more money in their pocket, they donate more. In the years times are tough and they have less, charitable donations go down. So part of this was really encouraging an economy that would allow families to give more and businesses to give more.